I was exhausted from my 13-hour flight when I finally unlocked my front door and stumbled inside, my body still on Japanese time. The first thing I noticed wasn't the eerily empty space where my living room TV had been. It wasn't even the ransacked drawers in my bedroom. It was the odd brightness streaming through my usually shaded skylight, a skylight that had been covered by solar panels for the past 2 years. I dropped my bags and ran outside, neck craned toward my roof. The entire array, all 12 panels that had cost me nearly $20,000 to install, was gone. Not a single panel remained. Just empty mounting brackets and dangling wires where my pride and joy had once been. What the hell? I whispered to myself, fumbling for my phone. That's when I remembered the security cameras I'd installed last year after a string of porch pirates had targeted our neighborhood. My hands trembled as I opened the app, praying the Wi-Fi had stayed connected during my 2-week vacation touring Japan. The notification badge showed 37 unviewed alerts. I tapped on the first one. What I saw made my jet lag vanish instantly. There she was, Nancy Voss, our beloved HOA president, directing 3 men in unmarked overalls as they methodically dismantled my solar array. The timestamp showed this happened just 4 days into my vacation. I'm Adam Sullivan, small business owner and proud homeowner in the desirable Sunny Creek Estates. I say, desirable, with all the sarcasm I can muster because our community's appeal had plummeted since Nancy took over the HOA presidency 3 years ago. What started as strict enforcement of lawn maintenance rules had evolved into something resembling a dictatorship, complete with arbitrary fines and sudden rule changes. But stealing my solar panels? That crossed every line imaginable. I pressed play on the next video clip, my blood pressure rising with each second. Nancy was pointing at my roof, gesturing emphatically as one worker shook his head. I turned up the volume. I don't care what he told you. Nancy's shrill voice pierced through the speaker. The HOA has determined these panels violate our aesthetic guidelines. They're coming down today. One of the workers pointed to some papers. Ma'am, our work order says the homeowner authorized removal for cleaning and maintenance. If that's not... I'm the HOA president. I have authority to act when homeowners violate bylaws. He knew these weren't approved. That was a bald-faced lie. I'd gotten written approval before installation, had followed every regulation to the letter, and even paid an extra architectural review fee Nancy had invented just for my project. I fast-forwarded through hours of footage, watching my investment being dismantled panel by panel. By the time I reached the final clip, the men had loaded everything onto a truck with Valley Solar Solutions printed on the side, and Nancy was signing something on a clipboard. Before I could process what I was seeing, my doorbell rang. I jumped, half expecting to see Nancy standing there, ready to explain why my house had been partially robbed while I was gone. Instead, it was my neighbor Oliver. Adam! You're back. Thank God, he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. His eyes darted around my living room. I see they got in here too. Two? What do you mean two? Oliver's face fell. You haven't heard? 3 houses got broken into while you were gone. Police think it's the same crew that hit the Westridge neighborhood last month. He paused. But that's not why I came over. It's about your panels. You saw what happened? Oliver nodded grimly. Everyone did. Nancy called an emergency HOA meeting the day after you left. Said your panels were installed illegally and were an eyesore that diminished property values. When I pointed out you had approval, she claimed you'd falsified documents. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And people bought that. Some did. Others didn't, but Nancy insisted she had legal authority to remove them. Oliver pulled out his phone. I took pictures of the meeting minutes. And I recorded part of it too, when things got heated. I watched a shaky video showing Nancy standing at a podium, her helmet of highlighted blonde hair unmoved by the ceiling fan above. As president, I have a duty to maintain our community standards, she was saying, her voice dripping with self-righteousness. Mr. Sullivan's panels face the main entrance, and create a negative first impression for potential buyers. The board has voted to remove them at his expense. The video showed several neighbors protesting, but Nancy banged her gavel repeatedly until the room quieted. The decision is final. Next item on the agenda. She's insane, I muttered, handing Oliver back his phone. Where did they take my panels? That's why I rushed over when I saw your car. The truck took them to Valley Solar's warehouse. But here's the thing. Oliver leaned closer, lowering his voice unnecessarily since we were alone. My cousin works there. He said Nancy brought in the panels as a trade-in toward a new installation at her house. She's claiming them as hers. I felt like I'd been punched. This wasn't just HOA overreach. This was theft, plain and simple. She's installing my panels on her roof? Installation is scheduled for tomorrow morning. I thanked Oliver and practically shoved him out the door. I needed to make some calls before Nancy's theft became irreversible. First, the police. Then my lawyer. And finally, Valley Solar Solutions. The police dispatcher took my report but didn't sound optimistic. Civil matter between you and your HOA, she said, though she promised an officer would stop by the next day. My lawyer's voicemail informed me he was out of town until Wednesday. And Valley Solar's customer service put me on hold for 20 minutes before transferring me to a manager who refused to discuss another customer's installation, due to privacy policies. I was getting nowhere fast. Meanwhile, my $20,000 investment was about to be mounted on Nancy Voss's roof. I pulled up the security footage again, studying it carefully. That's when I noticed something I'd missed in my initial shock. When the workers were loading the panels into their truck, Nancy was standing near my front door, looking around nervously. Then she did something unexpected. She used the key to unlock my front door and slipped inside. I fast-forwarded through several more clips. 14 minutes later, she emerged carrying what looked like my laptop and a small jewelry box. My stomach dropped as I realized what had happened. Nancy hadn't just orchestrated the theft of my solar panels, she'd used the opportunity to rob my house. I immediately checked my bedroom. Sure enough, the jewelry box containing my late mother's wedding ring and other heirlooms was missing. My spare laptop was gone from my office. And when I checked the living room more carefully, I discovered my vintage record collection had vanished too. This wasn't a random burglary coinciding with the panel removal. This was Nancy Voss systematically robbing me under the guise of HOA business. I was calling the police again when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Sullivan, this is Derek from Valley Solar. Your neighbor Oliver reached out. We need to talk about your panels. Can you meet me at our warehouse tonight at 8? I responded immediately. I'll be there. The Valley Solar warehouse was located in an industrial park about 15 minutes from our subdivision. When I arrived, a tall man with a clipboard was waiting by the side entrance. He introduced himself as Derek, the installation manager. Look, he said after we'd stepped inside. I didn't know what was happening when we removed your panels. The work order said it was approved by the homeowner for maintenance. I never approved anything, I said. I figured that out too late. When we got back to the warehouse, I checked the paperwork more carefully. The signature isn't even close to matching the one on your original installation contract. Derek led me through rows of shelving until we reached an area where my panels were stacked on a pallet. They're all here, but there's a problem. Ms. Voss has paid a deposit for reinstallation at her address tomorrow. Legally, I'm not sure where we stand. I pulled out my phone and showed him the security footage. She stole them. And then she robbed my house. Does that clarify the legal situation? Derek's eyes widened as he watched Nancy directing the removal, then entering my house. Jesus. This is way above my pay grade. He ran a hand through his hair. I can't release the panels without authorization from management, but I can delay tomorrow's installation while this gets sorted out. It wasn't the resolution I wanted, but it was a start. I thanked him and headed home, my mind racing with plans. If the police and my lawyer couldn't help immediately, I needed another approach. The answer came to me around midnight. If Nancy wanted to play dirty, I could match her game, but with one crucial difference. I'd have evidence, witnesses, and the moral high ground. The next morning, I was up early, putting my plan into action. First stop, the local print shop, where I made hundreds of flyers containing still images from my security cameras showing Nancy directing the panel removal and entering my house. Below the images I wrote, "Stolen property. These solar panels were illegally removed from 1478 Sycamore Lane by HOA President Nancy Voss during owner's absence. $500 reward for information leading to recovery. Contact Adam Sullivan with any information." By 9 a.m., I'd posted these flyers on every street lamp and community bulletin board in our neighborhood and the surrounding areas. I made sure to put several directly in front of Nancy's house. Next, I drove to the Valley Solar warehouse and parked across the street, camera ready. As Derek had promised, the installation at Nancy's house had been delayed due to equipment issues. But I wanted to be there in case she showed up demanding answers. Sure enough, at 10:23 a.m., Nancy's white Mercedes SUV pulled into the parking lot. I started recording as she stormed inside, her designer handbag swinging wildly from her arm. Through the warehouse's front windows, I could see her gesticulating furiously at someone behind the counter. 15 minutes later, she emerged looking flustered. As she reached her car, a police cruiser pulled up alongside her. I couldn't hear what was said, but I watched as Nancy's expression shifted from annoyance to concern. The officer pointed toward my car, and Nancy's head whipped around, her eyes locking with mine across the parking lot. If looks could kill, I'd have dropped dead on the spot. The officer approached my car, and I rolled down my window. "Mr. Sullivan? I'm Officer Peterson. Dispatch forwarded your report from last night. Can we talk about what happened?" I showed him the security footage on my phone, explained about the panels, and detailed the other items missing from my home. As we talked, I noticed Nancy sitting rigidly in her car, watching us in her rearview mirror. "This is pretty clear evidence of theft," Officer Peterson said after viewing the footage. "And breaking and entering. I'm going to need to speak with Ms. Voss. Would you be willing to come to the station to give a formal statement?" I agreed, and watched as the officer approached Nancy's car. Their conversation was brief, and I couldn't hear what was said, but Nancy's face grew progressively redder. Finally, she exited her vehicle and was escorted to the police cruiser. She wasn't handcuffed, but as they drove away, I felt the first real hope that justice might be served. At the police station, I provided a complete statement, including the footage, Oliver's recording of the HOA meeting, and a detailed inventory of everything missing from my home. While I was there, I learned Nancy was being questioned in another room. The detective handling the case seemed particularly interested in the fact that Nancy had used a key to enter my home. "Any idea how she got a key to your house?" he asked. I shook my head. "The only spare I know of is with my sister in California." The detective made a note. "We'll add unauthorized key duplication to the charges, then. Ms. Voss is claiming the HOA bylaws gave her authority to remove the panels, but she's denying entering your home or taking anything else. The video clearly shows. We know what it shows, Mr. Sullivan. Don't worry. We're taking this seriously." I left the station feeling cautiously optimistic. The detective promised to keep me updated and said they'd be executing a search warrant on Nancy's home that afternoon. In the meantime, I had more work to do. My next stop was the local newspaper office. The Sunny Creek Gazette wasn't exactly the New York Times, but everyone in town read it. The editor, a former investigative journalist named Patricia, was immediately interested in my story. "HOA overreach is one thing," she said as she reviewed my evidence. "But this crosses into criminal territory. And you say she's done similar things to other homeowners?" "Nothing this extreme," I admitted, "but she's been increasingly tyrannical. Issuing fines for violations that don't exist, changing rules without proper notice, using HOA funds for personal expenses." Patricia's eyebrows shot up. "Can you prove that last part?" I hesitated. "Not directly. But Oliver mentioned seeing financial reports that didn't add up. Get me those reports, and we might have a bigger story than stolen solar panels. Patricia tapped her pen thoughtfully. We go to print on Thursday. If you can get me more evidence of financial misconduct by tomorrow afternoon, I'll run it as the front page story. I promised to try, and left feeling like momentum was building. But I still didn't have my panels back, or my mother's ring, or any guarantee that Nancy would face real consequences. When I returned home, I found a small crowd gathered in my driveway. Word had spread quickly about the flyers and Nancy's police escort. Neighbors I barely knew were offering support, sharing their own stories of run-ins with Nancy, and asking how they could help. One neighbor, Tina, pulled me aside. I'm on the HOA board, she said quietly. Nancy's been hiding things from us. After I saw your flyers this morning, I went through some files in the community center office. I found something you should see. She handed me a folder containing bank statements for the HOA account. Several withdrawals were highlighted, large sums that didn't correspond with any approved expenses. Next to these, Tina had paper-clipped invoices from companies I'd never heard of. These are fake, she explained. I called 2 of them. They don't exist. Nancy's been embezzling HOA funds for at least a year. We're talking about nearly $40,000. This was exactly what Patricia at the Gazette had asked for. But more importantly, it was leverage. If Nancy was facing embezzlement charges on top of theft and breaking and entering, she might be more willing to return my property to get any leniency. I thanked Tina and promised to handle the information carefully. As the impromptu gathering dispersed, my phone rang. It was Detective Reeves from the police department. Mr. Sullivan, we executed the search warrant at Ms. Voss's residence. Good news, we recovered your laptop and jewelry box. The contents appear intact, including what you described as your mother's ring. Relief flooded through me. What about my record collection? Still looking. Her house is quite full. But there's more. We found documents related to your solar panels, including what appears to be a forged authorization for removal. And something else interesting, a key ring with labeled copies of keys to at least a dozen houses in your neighborhood. I was stunned. She had keys to other houses too? Appears that way. We're trying to match them to addresses. In the meantime, Ms. Voss has been formally arrested. She's being charged with grand theft, breaking and entering, possession of stolen property, and forgery. The DA may add more charges as we continue investigating. After hanging up, I sat on my front steps, processing everything. My panels were still at Valley Solar, but at least my mother's ring was safe. Nancy was in jail, facing serious charges. And thanks to Tina, I now had evidence of even greater misconduct. The next day was a whirlwind. I provided the financial documents to Patricia at the Gazette, who promised the story would run the following morning. I met with a detective to identify my recovered belongings. My vintage records weren't among the items found at Nancy's house, but the detective suspected they might have been sold already. Most importantly, I received a call from Valley Solar's general manager. Mr. Sullivan, in light of the police investigation, we're prepared to return your solar panels and reinstall them at our expense. We deeply regret our role in this situation and want to make it right. I accepted their offer, and they promised to begin reinstallation the following day. It was a start, but I knew the full resolution would take much longer. Nancy had violated not just my property rights but the trust of an entire community. 2 days later, the Sunny Creek Gazette hit driveways across town. The headline read, HOA President Arrested, Solar Panel Theft Leads to Discovery of Embezzlement Scheme. Patricia had done a thorough job, detailing not just my case but interviewing multiple homeowners who'd had run-ins with Nancy. The financial discrepancies were laid out clearly, with experts weighing in on the legal ramifications. By noon, my phone was buzzing constantly with calls and texts from neighbors, friends, and even local TV stations wanting interviews. The story had struck a chord, especially with people who dealt with overbearing HOAs themselves. An emergency meeting of the remaining HOA board members was called for that evening at the community center. I attended, along with nearly every homeowner in Sunny Creek Estates. Tina, who had been voted acting president, opened the meeting by addressing the scandal head-on. "We're all shocked and disappointed by Nancy's actions," she began. "The board had no knowledge of her illegal activities, but we take responsibility for not providing better oversight. Moving forward, we're implementing new checks and balances to ensure this never happens again." The meeting lasted 3 hours as homeowners voiced complaints, asked questions, and demanded reforms. By the end, several concrete changes had been approved. Financial statements would be made available to all homeowners monthly. Major decisions would require a community vote, and security measures would be enhanced at the community center where records were kept. As for Nancy, she remained in custody, unable to make the substantial bail set by the judge. Her husband had moved out of their house, reportedly embarrassed by the scandal, and rumors circulated that they were headed for divorce. The DA was pursuing maximum charges, using my case as the centerpiece of a broader pattern of abuse of power. A week after my return from vacation, I stood in my driveway watching as the Valley Solar team finished reinstalling my panels. The company had not only returned my property but upgraded several components at no charge, their way of making amends for their unwitting role in the theft. As the last panel was secured, my doorbell rang. It was Detective Reeves, holding a cardboard box. "Good news, Mr. Sullivan. We located your record collection. They were at a vintage shop downtown. The owner recognized them from the description we circulated." He handed me the box. "All accounted for, according to your inventory list." I thanked him profusely, then asked the question that had been bothering me since this began. "How did she get a key to my house?" The detective sighed. "We figured that out too. Ms. Voss apparently had access to the locksmith records for the entire subdivision. Anytime someone used the HOA's preferred vendor for lock services, she requested a copy of the key, claiming it was for emergency access required by the bylaws." "But that's not in our bylaws," I said. "No, it's not. The locksmith assumed she was acting legitimately as HOA president." He shook his head. "We've identified 14 houses she had unauthorized access to. 2 others reported items missing during homeowners' absences. We're still investigating those cases." After the detective left, I took my recovered record collection inside, carefully checking each album. They were all there, seemingly undamaged. As I placed the last one on its shelf, my phone pinged with an email notification. It was from the district attorney's office, confirming that Nancy Voss had been indicted on 26 criminal counts, including multiple charges of theft, breaking and entering, embezzlement, forgery, and fraud. If convicted on all counts, she faced up to 15 years in prison. I stepped outside onto my back deck and looked up at my restored solar array, now gleaming in the afternoon sun. The panels represented more than just clean energy or financial investment. They symbolized my right to improve my property within reasonable guidelines, a right Nancy had tried to steal along with the panels themselves. The experience had been infuriating and exhausting, but it had also revealed the strength of our community when faced with a common threat. Neighbors who had barely spoken before were now planning block parties and forming committees to improve transparency in HOA operations. 3 months later, Nancy Voss accepted a plea deal. She would serve 4 years in prison, pay restitution to all victims, and never again serve on any HOA board or in any position of financial trust. At her sentencing, she offered a tearful apology that few in the community found convincing. As for me, I installed additional security features throughout my house, including a high-tech lock system that notified me anytime it was accessed. My solar panels continued to reduce my electricity bill dramatically, and I even added a few more to increase efficiency. Tina proved to be an excellent HOA president, focusing on community building rather than rule enforcement. Under her leadership, property values increased more in 6 months than they had during Nancy's entire tenure. Sometimes I still think about how my relaxing Japanese vacation ended with such unexpected drama. But whenever I see my solar panels gleaming on the roof, I'm reminded that standing up to bullies, even those with official titles and fancy gavels, is always worth the effort. The sun shines a little brighter on Sunny Creek Estates these days. And thanks to my restored solar array, I'm capturing every bit of it.